Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another segment here on Project Purpose. For those of you who are new, we cover topics that relate to mental health, mental wellness, and education on a week-by-week basis. And today's topic of discussion is education. On the conversation on education this week, I want to talk about contempt. I want to talk about what the experience of contempt tells you about yourself as it relates to others, and how we can combat it, and as it relates to someone that we're experiencing that contempt towards. And I think that it's really, really important that we recognize that contempt is really an attitude, it's a position, it's a posture that we take when it comes to the narratives that we tell ourselves that are not translating the way that we expected. And because of that, because the person in front of you isn't behaving in alignment with your values, with your beliefs, with your attitudes about the world and about the people within that world, it makes you question what you feel about yourself as it relates to them. And that's what breeds this contempt. And so I want to talk a little bit about the mechanisms behind it, because it is really it's an experience that not a lot of us know how to unpack, and a lot of us, we just experience this contempt without challenging it, without taking the opportunity to look inwards and to really rewrite some of the scripts that we are operating with, to give ourselves an opportunity to feel comfortable in our skin, regardless of the people that we're interacting with. And so this conversation is really a byproduct of the conversation that I saw that took place between Zelensky and the Trump administration in the White House. And I want to talk a little bit about the mechanisms of contempt there and why they took place. And I think that it's really, really important that we recognize that there are always going to be people who operate in the world outside of what we expect them to. But if our response is contempt, it means that we ourselves don't feel sure, we don't feel secure with the ways that we see ourselves in this world. I think that contempt is an experience that a lot of people have when they've been able to make leaps and strides that they can't themselves substantiate with their own effort. Who have success, they can't root that success in their own achievements necessarily, or there's a lot of that success or a lot of the runway that gave them the advantages and the privilege that they have, that they can't root within their own work, within their own merit. They experience the most contempt towards other people. And so I think that this is one of the big reasons why it's really important to unpack the narratives that we tell ourselves, especially when the narrative that you're operating within, because society has told you that about yourself, is not necessarily in alignment with what you know to be true if you were to look at the ways that you yourself personally operate, or if you look at the ways that you have been able to attain some of the positions of success and privilege in your own life. And I think that this is a perfect example, because I think in that conversation there was so much contempt, and that contempt came from the fact that there is an individual who felt that they were better than the other person. I think Trump definitely felt that he was better than Zelensky. I think because Zelensky wasn't behaving in alignment, because he wasn't cowering or accommodating or trying to acquiesce to Trump's desires, it immediately flipped to contempt. And that contempt drove Trump and also drove his administration to try to treat Zelensky in alignment with what their beliefs of him were. And in doing that, they were trying to impose upon him the hierarchy that they themselves operate within. I think it's really, really important that we recognize that how we treat others say everything about ourselves and nothing about the person in front of us. And if it is the case that you feel inclined to treat someone with contempt, it is because your own inner narrative is that threat. It's because the things that you think about yourself is based on the things that you think about other people, and those people need to behave in a specific way that align to the stereotypes, the assumptions, and the beliefs that you have about them, for you to continue to believe and feel secure in the assumptions, beliefs, and in the narratives that you tell about yourself, whether they're true or not. And a lot of people are disingenuous because they recognize that they operate in a world where they're leveraging the assumptions about other people and the narratives that other people place on them, knowing that they don't actually function within that apparatus, right? And I think that it is the case when you see people interact, when you see Zelensky, who is for me a commendable man, he's an exemplary man, he's a man who has represented his people from start to finish. Like, he has sacrificed, he has really been strong for his people, be brought into a situation where he thought of himself as a guest, as an equal, a world leader talking with another world leader, recognizing that he himself is experiencing challenges because of a war that was imposed on his country, to then be treated with contempt by someone who he thought was an ally. And I think that it's really important that we recognize that the people that we think are for us, only for us because it makes them feel a certain thing about themselves. And I think that where Trump was happy to play the role of allyship with Zelensky was when he thought that Zelensky thought of Trump as in higher regard than what Trump himself belonged in. And I think that his true colors definitely show. Like, it's like, okay, well, you know, you should think about me the way that I think about myself, and that's not an equal, right? And I think that a lot of people assume that difficulties come on specific specific types of people. And because we ourselves haven't experienced those kinds of difficulties, then we can consider ourselves in higher regard. And I think that it's really important that we recognize that if someone is experiencing challenge, if they're experiencing difficulty, if they're going through a hard time, and you equate that hard time with the narratives and the beliefs and the assumptions and the biases that you have about them, the stereotypes that you have about them, and that in kind makes you respond with contempt, then it tells you a whole lot about the inner narratives that you yourself are balancing with. And as a woman who has experienced being terrorized, who has experienced being stalked, I recognize to what extent people who have no qualms with you, who have no issues with you, who are aligned with you, can flip to contempt when it is the case that you're experiencing difficulty because of these narratives and these biases and these stereotypes. It's like the moment that I'm not operating within the narrative that they assumed, then now they can treat me in a way that is in alignment with the narrative that now my situation is putting me in, right? It's challenge of the biases. And I think that it's really important that we take a look at ourselves and we think about how we treat people who are in difficulty. And Ukraine is in difficulty not by its own design, right? This is a war that has been imposed in Ukraine. And if there are people in the world who look at a country or who look at specific individuals who are experiencing difficulties that were imposed upon them with contempt because they themselves don't see themselves ever having to experience those challenges, then I'm telling you, like, it's just a matter of time, because difficulty falls on everyone. I think everyone experiences difficulties in different ways, but if you haven't yet, then your time is coming. And I think that it's really important that we recognize that empathy is really important. It's important to be able to try, at least at the very minimum, make the effort to put ourselves in people's shoes and recognize that, hey, if it was the case that I was in this position, how would being treated the way that I'm treating this person make me feel? And a lot of people don't put themselves in that place because they don't think that that situation is something that they would ever themselves experience. And maybe you won't experience it apples for apples, but difficulty again happens to everybody. And I think that also contempt can be something that takes place when you feel that you're in a position or you're in a setting and an environment that aligns with the biases, the narratives, the assumptions, the stereotypes that you believe about yourself. And when someone who looks different, who behaves different, who maybe is a different gender walks in and you're competing with that person, it can create a lot of feelings of inadequacy. It can make you feel really unsure about yourself because you operate from a place of these external narratives, these external voices driving, how the world works and social hierarchy and how that in and of itself should translate in the spaces and places that you're in. And I think that me as an individual myself, I challenge a lot of those assumptions. I can breed a lot of contempt from people who are operating not conscious or not aware enough to recognize that a lot of how they engage with others is through their own bias, is through their own stereotypes or unconscious bias. And a lot of the times those things are not triggered when you're in a social setting. Like if you were to meet me at a party or meet me at a bar or meet me at an outing, like a lot of the unconscious bias that you have wouldn't be triggered the way that it's triggered if you're meeting me in a professional setting or if you're meeting me in a conference, right? Because it's the setting that has changed, that has activated some of those unconscious biases that are limiting not just your ability to see me as being competent in that setting, but also limiting your ability to see yourself, right? Because a lot of the times the things that we think about others is really a reflection of how we think about ourselves. And I have experienced enough in my life to feel very confident about the spaces that I walk into. I feel confident about my ability to perform in arenas where maybe other people aren't sure. I feel confident not because I have delusions of grandeur like some people might have. Obviously we see that in some of the interactions that we're seeing play out in the political sphere. I operate from a place of confidence because my track record is its own proof. I have experienced enough in my professional and personal life that I recognize that with the tools, with the resources at my disposal, there's not a whole heck of a lot that I'm not able to do. I'm confident in my ability to fail, and I think that it's really important that we recognize that failure is a necessary prerequisite to growth and to learning and to evolution. Because I have a growth mindset, failure for me is an important tool that I leverage on a frequent basis, and I recognize that failure says nothing wrong about me. But a lot of people are afraid to fail. They're still dealing with this perfectionist snare, and as a result of that, it's really hard for them to see someone like me come in feeling confident, feeling sure about myself, feeling sure about my seat, about my place in specific settings where I'm not the majority by any means, when they themselves, being the majority, don't have that level of confidence, don't have that level of security, they don't have the track record necessarily, they don't have the level of experience necessarily that would give them the confidence that I have walking into that space. And it can be a very debilitating experience, and I recognize that, because even if I am in a specific space, at least I should feel insecure, I should experience a certain degree of imposter syndrome, I should feel like there is a certain level of social hierarchy I should abide by right? And that's absolutely not the case. I recognize that I am where I am because of my own effort, because of the sacrifices that I've made, because of the decisions that I have had to make that are like difficult decisions, the kinds of decisions that not a whole lot of people have in front of them. And so I think not only me being present can create a lot of contempt, but me being present, confident, feeling capable, I'm comfortable growing in a specific setting, so I have no qualms about failure. It doesn't translate for me the way it might translate for other people. That can in and of itself breed contempt. And I think that when we think about this specific scene with Trump and with Zelensky, I don't want us to count ourselves out. I want us to think about what situation would make me feel like I have the right to treat someone that way. And if it's not any situation, then like I commend you on your growth. But for some of you, if you yourself right now, if there's someone in your life that is the object of your contempt, I want you to think about, well, why is that the case? Like, what biases have you not unearthed? What assumptions, what stereotypes have you not unearthed that make it so hard for you to stomach that individual, right? Have they done something to warrant the contempt? Because a lot of the times contempt is really just a break in the perception, right? Is a break in the lens that we leverage when we operate around the world because someone is challenging that perception. And I think that it's really important that when we have opportunities to recognize that our contempt is breeding from the fact that we see ourselves a certain way in relation to others, and this one person is challenging that belief, lean into that challenge. Challenge yourself to see things differently. Break through the bias, break through the stereotypes that make you feel inclined to behave in ways that are inappropriate because you feel contemptuous. And trust and believe that I feel that how Trump handled that conversation was entirely contemptuous. It was completely uncalled for, but it was a reflection of his own weakness. It was a reflection of his own understanding that he himself doesn't belong in the Oval Office, that he himself doesn't have the level of character, integrity, and leadership qualities to be in that Oval Office. And for them to say those things to Zelensky, it is really just their words mirroring themselves. I think all of the people in that room recognized that they had no seat at that table. They didn't belong in that Oval Office. And the more they've tried to make Zelensky feel that way, the more they affirmed to everyone else watching that that was how they themselves felt. And by their actions, they most certainly were correct. So I think that it's really important that we think about contempt. This is a specific complex emotion that tells us a lot about the narratives that we're operating with. And if there is someone in your life that triggers contempt in you, if by looking at them and watching them operate, it makes you feel angry, it makes you feel resentful, it makes you feel bitter, it makes you feel inclined to lash out with anger and hostility, then there is a bias that you yourself are not confronting that is making it hard for you to stomach what that person represents and what that means as it relates to you, what it means by way of how you should shift and change the way that you view yourself in that setting. And I believe that experience is a true marker that enables all of us to feel confident, to feel capable, to feel like where we are in our lives is based on our own efforts, our own blood, sweat, and tears. Or no one can take something from us that is ours because of our own work, because of our own grit, right? And so because I am someone who is very confident now because of the experiences that I've had, because of the things that I have been through, I think that I'm comfortable experiencing the contempt that other people have. There's no sweat off my back. I'm comfortable to kind of ride the wave as they figure themselves out and figure out what biases are making them feel inclined to behave with contempt as well. But also I recognize that any behavior that is a byproduct of the contempt is a byproduct of them trying to reestablish order in alignment with their own biases, their own stereotypes, and their own warped and limited beliefs. And so if you don't want people to look at you that way, if you don't want people to look at your behavior, look at your actions and recognize like what stereotypes you yourself are operating within, or operating in, or what unconscious bias is at play because they've walked in the room and it challenges the way that you see the world around you, because it challenges the perception that you operate from, then do the inner work, do the self-reflection, and do better. Because I think if anything around the world watching that scene, all of us wish very deeply that that was handled differently and that they did better, or at least had the desire to do better at this stage in the game. So that was it for today. Definitely some food for thought for you. And if you want to learn more about self-mastery, about understanding some of the triggers that we experience and how it can be the signal that we need to focus on growth, on evolution, and on development, then I invite you to join our live events. We do host live events twice a month, every month for the foreseeable future on our Facebook page. So definitely be sure to tune in. We also do provide parent-child workshops that focus on cultivating grit, resilience, and perseverance in children. And these are digital, virtual, online workshops, one of the first of their kind. We offer 4 altogether: autonomy, self-efficacy, compassion, and self-concept. And it enables your child to cultivate the level of confidence to be a competent leader. And I think leadership is a skill that we want to develop while they're young. So those are some topics of conversation for today, some food for thought for you. And I thank you again for joining in on this journey. We are on the road to 1K, so definitely give us a follow, give us a like, and thank you again for giving us a small role to play in your journey. We'll talk to you all very soon.